There comes a moment when you've exhausted all your options while simultaneously coming across a product that reinvents your notion about what an honest and high-quality company looks like. The Healing Rose was the catalyst to that very moment for me. The Healing Rose Company is a female-owned Massachusetts CBD company based out of Newburyport that prides themselves in using only the best USDA-certified organically sourced ingredients for their vast line of therapeutic products. Their line stretches from lip balms, tinctures, skin balms, roll-on oils, and bath products. Their transparency places them above the rest with third-party tested results showcasing their intolerance to toxic pesticides, solvents, metals, and harmful elements. They provide full-spectrum CBD in many of their products, excluding their tinctures, which carry a broad-spectrum profile, ideal for not having to worry about any low-level THC, which is common for many CBD products. That one's my favorite, and it's good on the palate. Full-spectrum means that they extract from the hemp plant an array of different therapeutic cannabinoids along with CBD and their profile terpenes. The combination results in a greater outcome of healing and relaxation for any individual's needs. Whether you are an athlete looking for any recovery advantage, a patient in need of some relief to remind yourself that you are still a warrior, or someone who sees the frontiers of life with a little reserve and want to calm the mental storms that keep you from personally exploring, the Healing Rose CBD Company is here for your full body and mind optimization. Please visit thehealingroseco.com to explore their diverse line of products and support one of New England's best rising stars in an industry where ethics are fundamental, and a company like this will only be found sitting at the throne of it all. Use the code SAGAS, S-A-G-A-S, for 10% off your purchase. Again, visit thehealingroseco.com and use the promo code SAGAS at checkout for 10% off your purchase. To the many martial artists, entrepreneurs, dreamers, and thinkers, how often, for your own sake, would you love a symbolic reminder of your mentality and the perfect dichotomy to match? Murder Nerd is an independent clothing apparel line that represents the sharp, relentless focus towards personal growth and athletics. It embodies the vitality of their creative owners and the network of people who run on the same frequency. Why not elevate your frequency in comfort and style? Visit www.murdernerdsfitness.com for their personal line of shirt and hat wear. Enter the promo code SAGAS, S-A-G-A-S, for 10% off your purchase. Again, visit murdernerdfitness.com and enter the promo code SAGAS for 10% off your purchase. All right, guys, boom, here we go. We're going to try something a little new here. I love the off-the-cuff thinking process when it comes to a little more of the contemplative, introspective, shit that I try to throw on the wall type of podcast with the sauna. And that's going to be a majority of them. But I think that for the sake of doing certain podcasts some justice, like the No Stone Unturned podcast, I think I'm going to I've set up a little bit of a station with my laptop, just because I don't want to get too clinical with talking about it, but I also don't want to have misinformation or not be able to recall something I'm trying to think of. So, I know the rub is to be in the sauna, but I think to do it properly, there's going to be a small percentage of them that will have to be obviously outside of the sauna, because I can't remember all this stuff off the top of my head a lot of times. And really most of the times I have to review some of these ideas because they're all saved. I have them all on my phone. So I need to go over them, make sure I remember all these different action mechanisms and names and all that stuff. So either way, we're going to try this out for this one. And let's see. For this one took a little bit, this one took a little while. And I hope this comes out okay, but I'm going to do my best just to give you a very skeletal version of this and really allow for the literature and the videos to speak for themselves. I just kind of want to turn people in a certain direction when it comes to this information. So what this is going to be about is about mitochondria. There is a lot of talk within conferences or and also a lot of new published literature, much of it headed by a doctor called Terry Wahls, that talks about mitochondria and its connection to people's chronic issues. Because, people's chronic issues, they can stem from so many different things, right? It can be autoimmune, so then you have a malfunctioning of like antibodies and all these different immune system mechanisms. And a bunch of other sources to this. And one of the other ones too can be mitochondria dysfunction. So, for a little backstory, I obviously was looking into this when everything happened with my wife. So you kind of go looking anywhere you can for resources to try to figure out how to help. And the first place I assume most people go to, other than their doctor, is to look at what you're eating. And that was a big one for us. We tried a lot of different things, and I know that I mentioned about like elimination diets and intestinal permeability and all that stuff, but how do you now feed yourself? So once you figure out what to stay away from, what do you now introduce? And what does that actually do? So one of the first things I found was something called Feeding Your Mitochondria. It was a TED Talk by a doctor named Terry Wahls. Terry Wahls. She's a clinical professor, and I think she worked at the University of Iowa. She had a private practice, just doing her doctor thing. And at some point, she started to feel a lot of like fatigue. And as that progressed, things started to break down to a point where this woman actually was in a slanted, not a gravity chair, but she lived in her house between wheelchairs and one of those like slanted beds because she couldn't move. This woman had children. And she used to be very active. She climbed mountains. She did all the typical kind of outdoor activity things. So at some point, she starts to recognize the progression that's going on. And if I'm correct, she then ventures off into looking into, looking into more of the functional medicine side of things. So this is an MD who then furthers her knowledge and goes, kind of scours the internet for as much as she can. And she decides to get on an online furthering education course through functional MD channels. And what that means is she started to further her information on just nutrients, foods, cell growth, cell dysfunction. And the reason that that's so important in the realm of functional medicine is because that's how you try to mitigate symptoms or to discover the source of people's problems, is to really look at them on like a cellular level, right? And by the nature of doing that, you need more time with a patient. And these types of doctors, they're MDs, they're DOs, they're there's a spectrum of different classifications of doctors that are still functional doctors. They're MDs. You can further your education and be licensed as a functional doctor. The protocols and programs are a little different. And I know I've mentioned before that it can be a little more difficult seeing them just because insurance isn't very friendly to them. But that's a choice that they make, and to me that's a very honorable choice. Because you're not just kind of pumping out patients every 7-10 minutes and getting paid by your insurance company and all the other different ways that you're compensated. But so she furthered her education in that. So as she learned the different scope of looking at patients, she also discovered the information that would then help her in her future, which had to do with mitochondria and how she bridged the mitochondria to food intake and all of these different things. So she ended up experimenting with herself for, I'd say, almost 2-3 years on first elimination diets, then recording and researching the literature on different, what would you call it? The growth factors of food-derived nutrients into cellular bodies, right? We all eat our fruits and vegetables just for the reason that they're good for you, but we never really know what's happening, what's really going on. And the literature is there. I'm not sure if it's limited, but she found quite a bit to guide her. Whether it's a certain amount of cups per day with different vegetables, different classifications of vegetables, understanding different protein profiles, all that stuff, and what that does for your mitochondria. So eventually, at some point, she ended up actually getting out of her wheelchair, and she documented the whole process. And what she came up with was that, for whatever reason, there's a deficiency. Deficiencies can happen for a multitude of reasons. But this deficiency needs to be uncovered. And sometimes uncovering that means to really kind of hack or experiment with yourself. The experimentations came with inundating yourself with all of these different food groups, whether it was a high dosage of certain types of fats or sulfur-rich greens or foods, different types of, like I said, proteins. The thing is like, coming from her background, she's not a nutritionist or a dietitian. So she herself doesn't even realize what's going on with the food industry. So as she understands the literature of what food actually scientifically does for your body, she's discovering a lot of just all of the, I don't know what you would call it, just the bad practices of food agriculture. Whether it's discovering the different classifications of pesticides, what that does to your cellular membranes, what it does to your gut, and then looking at the different antibiotics, different grades of meat qualities, what that does to your system, how that deregulates cellular function. So this whole process was kind of obviously a huge discovery in itself into nutrition. And what she kind of discovered and started to bridge together were the different functions of mitochondria. A huge one that had to do with mitochondria had to do with like CoQ10. I think it's called coenzyme Q. And CoQ10 it's like if I'm not mistaken, I believe CoQ10 is like a carrier molecule within your cell. That's what allows things to kind of communicate correctly. And it's got different classifications and names. I think one of them is called ubiquinone. You can buy that as a supplement. And you can also test this through blood work. And if this is low, you can have all types of different side effects from having low CoQ10. And a lot of these different nutrients, especially like what your mitochondria needs a lot, are all the different classifications of like Bs, right? B1, B2, B6, B12. And you can find how and feel how when you inundate yourself with these different vitamins, also omegas, everything that correlates with sulfur-rich foods, they bring about more functioning when it comes to the CoQ10. And then as you start regulating that CoQ10, the different mechanisms for your ATP, right? The ATP is kind of like it is the expelling of the energy that the mitochondria make. So if all of these things are working in junction together and working well, then you have the right amount of energy, right? The depletion of ATP, the dysfunctional CoQ10, these all add to the idea of fatigue and then neurodegeneration. So in doing these protocols, she brought herself out of one of the worst states of MS that you could really be in, which is kind of the stage she was at seems to be the inevitable for most people, and hers was so quick. And she created a whole protocol around it, which is great because it's in 3 phases. It gets a little more strict as you go through it, but in the end, it's very much the very last stage is pretty much it's a Paleolithic ketogenic type of diet where you're feeding yourself a massive amount of vegetables, certain types of vegetables, being very mindful of your carbohydrate intake, different classifications of carbohydrates, obviously your sugars, inundating yourself with more healthy fats, and kind of playing this like mathematical balance with the whole thing, because she wrote a book, and as the book kind of talks about how you can bring up these fat levels so that they do cancel out a little bit of the higher carb intake that you take in, because you don't want to miss out on all carbs, especially good carbs that are in vegetables. And if you do that, you just bring up the higher fat content. And that could be in the form of all these sulfur-rich vegetables, in a smoothie, using almost a whole can of like coconut milk because of all of the fats that are in that. And then trying to have a lunch. So you're almost, in a very strange way, you're almost overeating. But and what goes along with this whole thing is also like an intermittent fasting. So it's a lot. It's a whole protocol. Like I said, she does a great job of summarizing it in her TED Talk. The book is very easy to read. It's very informative. It's also very, which I appreciate, it was very positive in the way that it talks about how disease doesn't always have to be such a mystery to people. I think the mystery of it is what is so dismantling for people mentally. Not knowing what it is, what's going on, and having your medical authority figures around you also telling you that they don't know. And a lot of these chapters, they're dressed up in a way that so that you go into this very excited and positive, because it can be I guess a little fatiguing in the way that you have to follow these things and educate yourself and prepare foods and all that. And we did that. And in the end, it helped my wife's mood. I'm sure it helped her pain to a degree, because I know that being in like ketosis as a result of doing ketogenic eating kind of calms down your insulin gland in your brain, which is the regulator of your glutamate neurotransmitters, and that, if that runs amok, that gives you pain. So I knew all of that stuff beforehand, and as my wife did it, like I said, she became very healthy because of it, but it didn't significantly bring down the pain. So whatever the mechanism that is continuing to wind up her nervous system is still going. So I'm not going to sit here and say that it cured anything, but the nice thing is that just because it didn't work for us doesn't mean it actually didn't work tremendously for a lot of other people. One of the great things is that when she went back to university and she actually got out of the wheelchair and got out of her bed and was able to go back to work, she didn't think she'd ever even go back to work. She went back to university, which is where she worked. I think it was Iowa State or something. And she worked really hard on trying to get grants to be able to make clinical trials that were engineered around her protocol that she made for herself. And somehow she got it. And that's not easy to do. And so this is a much bigger conversation I really want to build on at some point, but why it was so great that she got that is because it's hard to get funded money towards an experiment or an idea or a clinical trial that in the end there is no financial gain for someone who's investing in it, right? Like if I have a company and we're working on all these different patents, and some of these patents are here to help grow nerves again, right? Like that can be difficult to do. It is difficult to do. But my God, if you got that done, can you imagine the people knocking on your door, right? So hopefully you can find the grant money to do this, all with the projection that you're going to actually accomplish something that's going to be monetarily advancing for a lot of people. And that's just the name of the game, because it's about money, right? Yeah, you want to help people, and you might help people, but in the end, you're going to be able to help these people because people are putting in money into this thing, and that people are going to make money out of it. So to do that with food was almost shocking. No one's going to just sell you 3 cups of kale or carrots or cabbage or selenium or any of these types of things that they're already there. They're just foods. They're just supplements. They're just powders. They already exist. So luckily she did get that, and in the end the results came out just as she thought that they would. That all of these things were incredibly beneficial to all of to everybody that was a part of the clinical trial, because obviously you have to record all these things, and it was all done double blind, peer reviewed, all of that stuff. So it was a very big deal when the trial was done and she got the end result that she was looking for. Never mind getting the money to actually do this and fund it. So luckily, she's able to now intertwine that into patients that she sees with some of these neurodegenerative diseases, whether it's chronic fatigue, multiple sclerosis, all that stuff. And she's able to, quote unquote, prescribe these things as long as she reads that the patient will be compliant with it, right? Because it's going to take multiple meetings with the doctor, a lot of updates, and a lot of work on that person. Like, if you're at a heavy stage of your MS or your fatigue, you think you have the energy to be able to prep this food and then make then make this food and then eat it and then rinse and repeat every single day? Like, that's really hard. You're in a weird place where your your answer might lie over here, but by the nature of what is wrong with you, you'll never get there because you just can't function in a way that allows that. That's a mind fuck. That's horrible. So you just hope that like this is a family endeavor and that everybody gets on the same page and they help with this, because it is effort. And I think it's incredible work that she's done, because it's one of the avenues where it's one of the places where you can point to and have full confidence that the idea that food is everything is not, what would you say, dismissed, right? Because everybody tells you should watch what you eat, or maybe you should try this, or you should try that, or anything that falls under some kind of naturalistic, homeopathic thing. Like, it's unfortunate because there's a lot of bad representatives of some of these ideas. They themselves don't even know the literature. They're just kind of following other bad actors in these industries, and it does everybody a huge disservice. Because I get this vibe that the consensus around some of these, like, just change your food, change your diet, change your lifestyle ideas, you know, the vibe around it can just be very, like, roll your eyes dismissive. And I get it. You know, we're very much used to a certain system that is about pharmacology, and that can help and does work. But even in this literature, she discovers how certain medications, a lot of medications, actually deplete your, what is it called? It depletes your CoQ10, and your stomach acids and all that stuff, and all of that compounds, you know? And it's like, a lot of people are on medications their whole life. So every day taking these things, we don't know what is kind of diminishing as it goes on. And then 20 years in, we have these crazy symptoms, and we don't know where it's coming from. And we, like I said before, we just attribute everything to old age, because no one's going to prove or raise their hand to the idea that, yeah, you might have this because I had you on an SSRI for 20 years, or a statin for 10 years, or some diabetic medication for whatever amount, or a diuretic. Like, no one's going to own up to that. No one. Even though it says it right on the fucking box when you buy these things. But I get it. I'm not demonizing it. I'm just saying that they can act as good bridges into kind of changing the whole environment. But I know that takes effort. But it might be a little easier if you're not going into it blinded, and if you're in a direction that's actually proven. You know, this is kind of what the whole thing I'm saying is that she's a great flag. She is a place where you can point to with confidence, and as a good example for being able to do some of these things, because of her background, because of her experience, because of what she's gone through, and then also with the results that she's continuing to get through her practice when it comes to this whole Terry Wahls protocol, Paleolithic, ketogenic, mitochondria feeding way of living, really. So, you know, she's just a wealth of knowledge. The book that I bought is a wealth of knowledge. It's the Terry Wahls protocol. And that's it. I mean, I think she has she has a companion book, which is more like a cookbook that you can apply those recipes into the three different stages of the protocol, which is good. And in the original book, she kind of has a chart where you can kind of apply how you want to mix and match how to do this. But it's good to have kind of recipes, because even if you get a chart, you know, a lot of people aren't really the best cooks, so being creative in that way is to your advantage. And if it's not, you know, I can see that getting people to prematurely quit some of these things that might help them because they just don't know what to make. They don't know what to eat. They don't know these things. And I know all about that. I've eaten the same friggin' dinner three nights in a row, just because I'm just not creative all the time with recipes that need to follow a very strict parameter. So like I said, there's quite a bit to this, and I don't want it to get so insanely clinical that it's boring, and it's not like mitochondria is fun to listen to, but it's more of just a suggestion really in this, to kind of look into this doctor and into what she's talking about, because it's growing, and luckily it's getting popular. And I've suggested it to a couple MS patients that have come into my lab, and we delicately talk about these things, because I'm sure they don't want to hear this random dude tell them that he has the answer to their, inevitable future with just eating. Like, I'd slap me in the face too. But, I'm decent at building relationships and just kind of sliding this information in. And in the end, they're welcoming to it, and they appreciate it. And some of them have tried it, and it's actually helped them, It's just good to get some education on it. And when your back is against the wall with any type of diagnosis like this, you become very open to suggestion, which can be very good, but also be very bad, right? Because you're so desperate, you're reaching for things, and next thing you know it, you're like hanging upside down by your ankles, having people tickle you with feathers and blow angel dust in your face or something, thinking that it's going to cure you, but you're just that desperate. And I understand that, and that's a heavy feeling. So I think the TED Talk is called Feeding Your Mitochondria. It's like I said, just right on YouTube, TED Talk, Feeding Mitochondria. The book is just called the Terry Wahls Protocol. And there's plenty of stuff on here. So even if you didn't get the book, the summaries, the breakdowns, the different things that people are doing with it, it's all over. It's all online, whether it's Pinterest or you just kind of Google it or anything like that. So the information is definitely there, and you don't have to try to make yourself read her book. But if you're willing to, I think it's going to be to your advantage, because it will kind of hold your hand through the whole thing, educate you on some biology that I'm sure all of us have all forgotten about, and also give you a good sense of hope that, a good sense of hope in the idea that you have some control, right? And that's my thing. Whatever you can do for yourself, it adds more momentum to the idea that you have a little more control over what's going on. Because the less that you have, the more fear you have over the unknown. And if you're active in your health and active in your recovery, then it can act as a good acts as good positive momentum for a really difficult journey. So Terry Wahls Protocol, check it out.